Aloha, and welcome to another episode of the Hana Packers Edition podcast. The podcast where two dudes are joined by Tom Grossi today. I can't even say bright and early today for me because it is not bright yet. But Tom, thank you for joining us today on today's show. We appreciate you, like we were just discussing before we hopped on, finding the time, literally finding the time this week to join us today. Tom Grossi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I love it too, because like we had to plan across 3 different time zones. We're like, okay, so it's this time for this. All right, so I'm on the East Coast. Okay, yep, we're just moving on. So no, I'm glad that we were able to make this work.
All right, so I'm going to start. Now, I know when it comes to like royalty, it's, you know, your Royal Highness, and then it's your Majesty after that. So with you, is it NFL Fan of the Year first and then Mr. 30 for 30 after that, or
I'm Tom. It's so funny because like that's the probably most consistent comment I get. Like whether it was 30 and 30 and doing the fan events, or like now it was the International Stadium Tour, or just like going out and like meeting fans like randomly on the street. And they're just like, you're just a guy. I'm like, I know. That's what I keep telling everybody. Like, I'm a dude, man, that like loves the Packers and loves football. So yeah, no, we don't gotta have any titles here. Tom is great.
No, you know, obviously the two main guys that you always try to get on a podcast is Andy Herman and of course yourself. And so I knew even back when I started this whole thing with Nick, you know, like 3 years ago, it was like, okay, well, we're going to try to get Andy on. We're going to try to get Tom on. We somehow managed to get Wes Hodkiewicz on before we got any of those on. So,
shout out Wes Hodkiewicz, legend.
Now, I always
we all know Wes has an off season. We all know Wes has an off season where he's like, "What am I going to do today?"
Well, and I always joke with people. I had to stalk Wes at Lambeau just to get him on.
You're just like, I was appearing outside his home. I was scratching on his window every night, just throwing pebbles.
Please don't find us, FBI.
Well, what it was is I was actually at Lambeau during OTAs last year, and I was waiting for a buddy of mine, and Wes just happened to be coming out of the offices and down the escalator and all that. So I was like, all right, here's my shot. So
there you go. Hey, listen, you shot your shot, and it worked.
Hey, and like I told you before we recorded, I am one of the most persistent assholes you're ever going to want to meet. So
that's it. Persistency, baby. Persistency.
So, all right, Mike, I think we got a pretty good show going on. We're going to continue with our top fives. Since the Packers are not going to give us any kind of news at the moment, whether it be a Jordan Love extension, a Kenny Clark extension, you know, any of that stuff, we've got to come up with our own content for this stuff. Since I've been the one pretty much picking the top fives, I decided since Tom's got a background in history, we're going to go with our top 5, kind of a mix of historical moments, historical time period things. So actually Tom picked that one. I was going to go with historical figures, but he wanted to go with the time period. So he is the,
you know, it's an events time period. I feel like it was a little bit more general
on this exam.
Like the 2010 Packers Super Bowl win. That's an event. Like I think that's pretty historical. Like it counts.
Yeah. And I can say with a good certainty that the 3 of us were probably in our adulthoods when that one happened. So
yep, I was in college.
Well, damn, I'm even older than you, Tom. I didn't think I was that much older than
I know,
you.
I look so much worse. Significantly worse. This is a face of an aged man.
Well, see, you never know, because, you know, Mike's 400 years old, and you would never know that, but it's the Japanese part of him that makes him look a lot younger than he actually is.
It's that age range between 20 and 70 where it all gets lost.
It could be anything. It could just be like, actually, no, I'm 54. No, I'm 21.
It just depends on what kind of skincare product. If you've got the good hair genes,
you gotta moisturize.
But so with this show, like I said, historical time periods, historical moments, whatever goes with that. We have been kind of throwing some honorable mentions out to start with. So if I will preference with this. I'm a big historical guy. There was only 2 subjects that I was good at in any kind of school, whether it be college, high school, whatever, was writing and history.
You're a humanities guy. That's it. Yeah. It's usually like English lit, and then it's history, and then it's like math, science. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many of them in my head that I had a hard time coming up with just 5 spots. That's why I was kind of hoping for historical figures, because I can usually narrow those guys down to, okay, well, I read everything about this, this, and this.
Sure.
But you had to give me the generalized, and it's like, okay, what do I whittle it down to? So I'm not going to give any honorable mentions, because we'd probably be here for another 2 hours if I were to do that.
It'd be a list of 25. You're like, the dawn of man coming in at number 25 for an honorable mention.
So if you guys got any honorable mentions before we get into our list, you go ahead and throw them out. So I'll let you guys have the floor for that one.
I don't know about, I got a concise 5.
Okay.
I did. So I will say, I understand how difficult that is. When I taught AP Euro, I actually brought in March Madness into it. So by the end, because the AP is always in May, right? So in March, when March Madness is going on, what I have them do at the very end of the year is I have a 64-person bracket. And we like have the class pick the 64 most influential people. And it's up for them. Like, and they debate, who the top 64 are. And then we put them up all on the list, and then they have to decide who's the most influential person. So they go through the entire course all over again, and they can justify, okay, this is why this person's more influential, et cetera, et cetera. And there's no wrong answer, right? It's like as long as you could justify it. So yeah, no, this is bringing me back. This is dope.
Well, that's what I was hoping for, because we try to fit in with any kind of our guests, and I did know that you were a history teacher at one point, so it was like, okay, well, this will fit. This will fit perfect. So, Mike, do you got any honorable mentions you want to throw out there, or do you ready to just jump into your 5?
Nah, you know what? Let's just let Tom lead it off. Let's let the guest lead it off.
Mike's like, the creation of time zones, not on there for me. Not that's
who
who did it?
Mike is probably flying by the seat of his pants like he does every other top 5 that we do, so we're good on that one.
I can neither confirm nor deny. Also, what is a list right now? My brain is. I don't even ask me what time you are at right now.
It's very fair.
I feel you, man. I feel you.
I'm going to turn into the greatest podcast host of all time, because I'm just going to start turning it over to you two every moment I can.
Well, Mike is just like a really great listener. Like, he just keeps on like pushing it up.
Well, why does he look so upset the whole time now?
Actually, I'm kind of scared right now, because I usually have to tell Mike to shut the hell up so I can get a word in wise. So this is kind of weird for me.
The private chat is
dynamics have changed.
The private chat is just constant reminders. Mike, stop. Mike. Pause. Okay, now let's bring it back.
Or I would have to literally stop the recording and say, Mike,
that's what I meant by pause.
Slow it down.
But that's how you know you have a good show going. That's how you know you got a
Mike,
good dynamic.
Mike, you're already on number 2. I haven't even given my number 5.
He was like, we're just getting through this list. We're getting through.
So, all right, since he's going to bypass that, let's go ahead and start jumping into our top 5. I will say with my list, it's not going to be in any order, so I'm just going to go randomly with that. So, Tom, why don't you give us your number 5 event?
Right. So it's funny because this actually came up yesterday during Friday night Q&A when I was live 12 hours ago. And and it's the end of the 1800s. I'm talking specifically about Western Europe. But there's like this mass education, like mass like literacy increase that like creates kind of like modern day society in terms of all these different countries are connected now, and people are reading newspapers that are not just about like their cities anymore or even their countries. It's about what's going on in other countries. So I usually just talk about like the mass modernization of like the late 1800s. There's different names for it, but I like that one when I explain it. So yeah, I think that one's a big one, just because then you're going to start to get like world politics that regular everyday folks are going to be aware of, and it's going to influence elections. It's going to influence like education, which is going to be huge. So yeah, mass education, mass literacy, end of 1800s. It's a big one.
And then it pisses off a bunch of people because then immediately you get the World War and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
It's like, I'm so glad I can read about this now.
No, that's a good time period. It's amazing to see where time goes, because the United States is still kind of just coming out of that Old West, kind of lifestyle, and they're moving into more, I don't want to say like a modernization, because they have the technology and stuff like that, but it's now starting to spread throughout the continent.
Sure.
Europe is, everybody should know, if they don't already, that the United States has been around just a short amount of time compared to the rest of the world. So to get that kind of spread everywhere, and then all the stuff from Europe coming over is great. And, it kind of throws in with what I like to do as a hobby. I love to do genealogy stuff.
Nice.
And my dad's grandmother and grandfather were like first generation from Sweden, and they were still getting like newspapers and that from Sweden and communications. So that kind of fits in with what you're talking about in that modernization and that. So yeah, that's a solid one to go.
It's a solid 5-1. It's a solid 5.
Yeah. Mike, what do you got? Or are you just going to bypass this one?
Yes, I'm bypassing. Go. I plead the fifth.
The creation of the amendments. Done.
So, yeah, I'll go ahead. Yeah, Mike's still out of it. I can see it on his face. So I kind of split my list up a little bit in some time period stuff, but I also did some like event stuff.
Got it.
So the first group that I'm going to do, and I kind of cheated on these two because I've got duos on it. But as some people might know, my birthday was just Thursday, July 11th.
Happy belated.
So I thank you very much. I did want to kind of go with that. And unfortunately, I was born on a day that really didn't have a ton of historical events or people that was born on it. So, and that's been my bane of existence forever. But there are a couple of things that were big time news and events, and people should know about them just based on recent things and like shows and that. But the first one of it is in 1914, Babe Ruth made his major league debut, and he pitched for the Red Sox to a 4-3 victory over the Cleveland team. I think they were the Indians at that point. They could have not been. I know they went through like 300 different name changes before they landed on the Indians. And then the other one is even bigger, just due to Lin-Manuel Miranda. And that was in 1804, was the duel between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton.
There you go.
And Hamilton died the next day, but the duel and that all happened on July 11th, 1804. So that's the only provenance on my birthday as far as I can tell.
I thought you were going to pull a swerve and be like, nothing happened on my birthday. So my birth, that's number 5. That is the historical event.
You have to look clear back almost 110 years ago before you get any major event happen on July 11th. So yeah.
Then it's your birth. That's it. So
exactly.
now it's important.
And we're good. We're good. But yeah, I decided to pull those just as, and I got a couple of those on my list, but Tom, you might know the term a little bit more due to the wrestling, but I'm getting the cheap pop out of this stuff.
You got the cheap pop. I got it. I got it. That's fine. How we doing tonight? It's all good. You got to do it.
All right, Mike, you got one?
Unlike Joe, my birthday, I should say, actually has a few moments of prominence on it. But I'll go with one for the Americas. on March 23rd, 1775, one Patrick Henry delivered his "Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death" speech at St. John's Episcopal. I cannot claim that something that is, oh shit, hold on, 215 years before my birth date. Okay, I can still math at what the fuck time is it right now? 5:50 in the morning with my brain still half asleep and trying not to wake the neighbors. But 215 years before I was born, I guess something important happened on the day that I would be born later. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest one in terms of America. And I mean, you run the gamut of a whole bunch of other things. Running up till most recently in 2021, that's when that container ship ran aground in the Suez Canal. Yep. I remember sitting there. I do remember sitting there 3 years ago on my birthday. I was just like, open up Twitter, the balloons go by, and then I was like, what's this video here? but I'll go with the John Henry thing instead.
I don't know. The Suez Canal thing was news for a while.
Yeah, that was forever.
Or Patrick Henry, not John.
Yeah, that was for that was amazing. But I like the Patrick Henry one a little bit more because I remember in one of my college courses, one of the history courses, the professor really hit home with it because this wasn't just like an idle statement. You know, he was meaning this. This was at a time that if they got captured, you know, they were going to get hung because they were traitors. So he was literally saying, you know, in like modern terms, you know, bring it on, bro, you know, just so it, you know, I really like that one. That one's pretty good.
I like it.
It's all down here from here for me. So, Tom, please take it away with number 4.
I like how Mike is just like reading like the exact quote and is like, and on this day, and he's like, that's what I got. Nathan's
Isn't that what history class is? Nah, I'm kidding.
All right, I'm gonna cheat with this one because I have to put it on the list because it's my favorite time period. So like, I think it's very historical. I'll make the argument all day, but I'm gonna throw it at number 4. And it's post World War I, like cultural changes, and that is for the States. That's for Europe. It's my favorite time period of all time. You have the war to end all wars, which is World War I, which is horrific. It's pointless by the end of it. People are like, wait, why is this thing started? Oh, because Gavrilo Princip shot this guy. Like, okay, why? Yeah. So, and it just sets off this domino effect that has been building for years and years and years of just mobilization, just arming themselves. You talk about Maine, right? Nationalism's in there as well. And post World War I, like there's the lost generation, right? You have like F. Scott Fitzgerald who's writing stuff. Like that's when Gatsby's going to start coming out. You have, of course, the Roaring Twenties, which happens afterwards. But you have such a shift of, okay, like what do we do now? Like we're never going to war again. It was horrific. Yeah. Millions of people died. Right? Then you have the flu that comes in and kills even more people. And there's just like nihilism, which came out before that. Like that starts getting some headway. You see the creation of jazz, and music is no longer something you just listen to. It's something you dance to. Art is kind of completely and totally changed. And you have like Dadaism that comes in and a urinal of like, this is what art is now. And so it's just like these really existential questions of like, okay, like love is dead, God is dead, like all of these things are dead because why would he allow this to happen? Why would we, like, what do we have to strive for anymore? So I just really like that time period and the art that comes up during that time period because I think it really reflects a worldwide and global trauma, and it's like how people are trying to work through that. And there's some people are like, okay, like we got to go back to the good old days, right? Like we got to go back to like religion. We got to go like to the basics. And then there's some they're like, no, we got to do things completely different. And yeah, you have a lost generation that comes out of that.
It's kind of funny how things don't ever change when it comes to those things, you know?
Nope.
But yeah, that's a good time period. Because yeah, like you said, a lot of things started changing. You started getting music that wasn't the ballroom type big symphony stuff. It was, you know, these small little groups that could go into a you know, at that time it would be the speakeasy because that's when prohibition is really starting to take over and stuff like that. So
women's suffrage, like there's like so many things that come out of that, and it's a wild time period.
Yeah, and you know, that's where we start getting some terms that, because now people are starting to realize that there are mental health issues, because
Sure.
that's when you start getting like shell shock, which ends up being PTSD at this time.
Yep.
And
how that's treated.
Yeah, yeah. So it's amazing, that time period is amazing to just sit down and realize how much things jumped forward. And you know, it's always bad. You know, war is never good for anything.
Sure.
Except for technological advances, because
Sure.
that's, you know, they always, everything bumps up after a war happens. Now, let me disclaim that I'm not saying we need to go to war just to get better technology.
Joe's like, I want a new iPhone. Let's pick things up here.
Joe wants the advancement on rifling. He wants the next evolution on rifling.
I just want teleportation, guys. Come on. I'm tired of sitting
Honestly,
in a car
valid.
for 8 hours. You know, let's get it where I can just hit a button and be there in 10 minutes.
That's valid.
But yeah, that's a good time period. So this next one of mine, I cheated again. It's kind of a dual thing. I told you this was really hard for me, so I had to cheat on
Good.
some stuff. And these are specific time periods, specific dates, which leads to time periods that I enjoy reading about.
Yeah.
The two dates are July 14th, 1881 and April 26th, 1865. And the significance of them is the July 14th, 1881 is when Billy the Kid, and I even have it in brackets here, was allegedly killed. And then April 26th, 1865 is when John Wilkes Booth was allegedly killed. And the reason why growing up, I was a huge Old West fan. I would read everything I could about the Old West or the Civil War or stuff like that.
Sure.
And as I got older, I'd start reading some of this stuff. It's like, well, you know, that doesn't make sense with this and that. Well, then that leads you down that whole rabbit hole of the conspiracies with it. And so the reason why I say allegedly is because, you know, with Billy the Kid, there's two famous guys that went on to proclaim that they were Billy the Kid. And then there's one major story of a guy proclaiming that he was John Wilkes Booth after they were supposedly killed. Mm-hmm. The two for Billy the Kid was John Miller and Brushy Bill Roberts. That Brushy Bill might ring true to somebody in like our age bracket that ever watched Young Guns 2, because that was the whole story plot of Young Guns 2. But you know, it was just an old guy that got with a lawyer that just proclaimed that, you know, he was Billy the Kid, and you know, he had all these stories and all that. Of course, it split 50-50 that, you know, 50% believe what Pat Garrett says and 50 believe that, you know, hey, he did. I'm a staunch believer that Billy survived that night. I don't know if it was John Miller or Brushy Bill, but there's too many things in that storyline that I just, it's hard for me to believe. And then the same with the John Wilkes Booth thing. In that time period, it was so easy for people to get away.
Sure.
Because they didn't have the technology like we do now, where, you know, I can pop up my phone and I have an instant camera running somewhere, at some point, and facial recognition and all this other stuff. But the story with Booth is that Finus Bates was a lawyer. This guy was on his death, thought he was dying. Finus went in there, talked to him, and this guy, David E. his name was John St. Helens, claimed that he was John Wilkes Booth. The guy that was killed was just an accomplice that had all the documents and all that on him, because Booth had dropped him. The guy picked him up, got shot, and that's what happened. This John St. Helens would later recover and not actually die. and disappeared. Well, then later on, this guy actually killed himself. He took strychnine poisoning, and when they found him, there was like a note proclaiming that he was Booth. Well, they called him Finest Bates, and because he had been known about this, and he goes, "Yeah, that's John St. Helens. I know that guy anywhere." And it would go on that he would travel and they embalmed him, and the embalming and the strychnine mixed together and mummified the body. And Finest Bates would later take that on the road as "This is John Wilkes Booth." Now, again, I don't know if I believe that's actually Booth, but I do believe it's possible that he could have escaped that night because, again, there's a bunch of shady shit that went on that, you know, they kept it all secret. And, you know, whenever there's a secret, there's usually somebody hiding something. But a side note, Finest Bates is actually Kathy Bates's grandfather.
That's a fun fact. That's a fun fact.
The answers are on the back of the Declaration of Independence.
Nicolas Cage knew it. He knew it.
Hey, that's why they've never come out with National Treasure 3, because that's what it is.
Lemon juice and an oven. That's all we need.
But no, I'm not going to say I'm a huge conspiracy nut. I just, when I don't think something sounds right, I don't always take the official version for the facts. So that's why I dig into it, and I just sit there and I read and I read and I read and I read. So.
But that's also like creates a passion for history, right? I mean, like when you learn history, like in school, depending on the teacher, depending on the curriculum, depending on where you are, things are often painted with some pretty broad strokes, right? And be like, okay, there's this and this and this and this. And I find like the most interesting thing is like when you get like those random primary sources, or like I was talking about this last night, like The Great Gatsby, right? You had to read it in school and all that great stuff. I was like, okay, it's fine. But it wasn't until I had a U.S. history professor like talk about post-World War I, talk about that trauma, and then read it in that context. And I was like, this is one of the greatest books like ever written.
Right.
Yeah. So like it's those different things. And I think it's those individualized stories or what have you that really develop that passion, because dude, like you could spend forever talking about John Wilkes Booth, right?
Yeah.
Like just like one person in time, and you could just go down a rabbit hole. And so like, yeah, I think that stuff is fascinating.
So yeah, that it's just, and like you said, it gives you that rabbit hole to, because now you want to explore the other stuff that goes with it. And so if I were to take all the books that I have about certain subjects, I'd probably have my own little library going on right now. So
hell yeah.
All right, Mike, you got to wake up for this one. We're on number 4.
All right, so to kind of dovetail that comment Tom made about, you know, where you grew up kind of influencing the history that you learn and how you learn it in classes. So mine is going to be Japanese internment in World War II, basically because, you know, we weren't necessarily the epicenter of it, but obviously the triggering event that caused internment, you know, to really be, you know, that catalyst, that was the catalyst for internment. Thank you, Tom.
I got you. Let's go.
You know, was December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. I kind of brought it up when we did our Memorial Day episode. You know, I'm full Japanese, or at least, you know, we have some fun inter-family jokes about that. But so far as we can tell, I'm 100% Japanese. All 4 of my grandparents, you know, grew up, you know, on Oahu. And out of the 4 of them, only one was interned. You know, one's family was interned during the war. My maternal grandmother, her family was interned first at Camp Jerome and then at Tule Lake for pretty much the duration of World War II. They were identified because my great grandfather was known as a Kibe Nisei, which means that, you know, he was born in Hawaii, but he did go back to Japan to be raised, and he did serve in the army. So, you know, he fell into one of those those bins of like, these are high risk personnel who need to be identified and segregated really from the rest of society. And, you know, it's one of those where you study it in school. And like I said, in Hawaii, especially with the high Asian population density, you know, you get a different version of history through your teachers, especially if you have a teacher who, whether it's an Asian, a teacher of Asian ethnicity, or you have one who is just so like, we had the yellow fever, who just truly bought into I love Asian culture, I love Asian history, this is going to be my life's work, and it is my goal to pass on the information that I have gathered and stuff. And so, you delve into it, from the outside looking in, it's like, I don't want to generalize it, but you fall into the two camps of, this is a horribly wrong thing, or, hey, it's war is bad, and therefore you need to take measures that are, and that's the viewpoint that kind of won out, and why we had, why it took 50 years for reparations to be made to these families and stuff. Yeah. But, so like I said, my maternal grandmother's family fell into the camp of where it's like, hey, these people are potentially dangerous. We know that Pearl Harbor had, people on the ground who helped set it up. How do we know that, people like my great grandfather aren't also, potentially in on this thing? And, I do kind of look back, and not that my grandmother would have necessarily known, but, you hear about like no boys and stuff, and you kind of read it and you're like, I do not blame anyone in my grandma's family for potentially falling into that. After the war, my grandma's oldest sister and my great grandparents, like, they renounced their citizenship, went back to Japan. Wow. Because, just the ultimate, the ultimate fallout of what had happened to them during the war, where it's like, no, like, we told you, we're Japanese Americans, emphasis on the American side of it. And, there's a whole lot of other parts of my grandma's families, they did move to Peru at one point. So my grandma is actually born in Peru. So my grandma went to her deathbed with dual American Peru citizenship. Yeah. But and it's just the contrast of like that 1/4 of my heritage experienced the worst parts of American society, where it's like they were outcast. And like I said, this is not to put their plight on the level of like slavery or any other minority that was wronged or anything like that, but just to know that like at some point someone in your family was looked at and was viewed as like the ultimate enemy, betrayer, whatever label you want to put on it. And even like my other 3 grandparents, my mom's dad, my paternal grandfather, he would end up serving. Obviously, he missed thank goodness he missed the very end of World War II, but he was drafted into the army, and, he would serve to, Operation Magic Carpet Ride. He was security detail on the ships that would bring troops home from the Pacific. Yeah. And then I didn't get into this on our Memorial Day episode, but so my grandma's siblings who stayed, so my grandma, her brother and her sister, they ended up getting taken in by some of the family who ended up, staying, their other cousins and stuff. So I've got aunties and uncles who took care of my grandma and her siblings who stayed. And my Uncle Richard, and he ended up enlisting in the army and served in Korea. So like, just within that family, you see like the total different ends of the spectrum. Yeah. And like within the family dynamics, my aunt, the one who renounced her citizenship and now is like, she's 90, she's going to turn 96 or 97 this year, I think. She's, and like I said, I do not blame her at all. Like, yeah, big grandma got a reparation, all that kind of stuff, but she goes, it's not enough. And, and we're on the other end of it. My Uncle Richard, before he passed away in the early 2000s, like, he's got his transcript of an interview he did for a history recording service. And then my grandma, like, I do look back on it and I kind of wish that I had asked her more about it. But at the same time, I kind of looked at it as where, compared to my Auntie Sarah, my grandma was very, much more like at peace about it, where she was just kind of like, her answers were more like limited and basic to like, yeah, it was a good, like, it was dusty, it sucked and all that kind of stuff. And so it just, and like I said, and the opposite side of that is I had 3 grandparents who grew up a quote unquote normal childhood, in that time period. So like, those 2 grandparents, they're both born in 1927. So they grew up, they're at the same age in life growing through World War II. And then my dad's side, my grandparents were born in 31 and 33. So they were younger. But just to, like you said, Tom, history is written by the winner and those that you're experiencing it, in closest proximity to. And so that moment in history, like I said, yes, and this isn't like a smear against the US or anything, like, and the end of it, at the end of it, my family has lived the American dream. They came from another country, set their roots in, and they've got, 4th, 5th generation now that have set their roots in and are, looking forward to what this country can give them. But it's one of those moments where you can't downplay, you can't quiet what that moment was for America, because it's that whole, the way that I look at it is like, it should be studied and it should be, ingrained in everyone's, historical memory bank, because it's something that, like, we have the war, we grew up through the war on terror, it's still going on and stuff. Sure. And, now the whole Israel-Palestine conflict. And it's like, you just can't repeat, there's going to be another conflict just because that's what humans are. Like I said, look, the Israel and Palestine thing. It's like you have 2 sides who, and I'm not even going to get into it, but you have 2 sides who are like, this is where we come from and we're going to fight tooth and nail for it. And because of that mentality, it's like, no matter what happens going forward, of course, the true reality is probably just going to nuke each other into green glowing blobs. But we cannot repeat the internment of World War II. And if that is what is gleaned from it in the future generations, that is the ultimate staying power of why it needs to be taught in history moving forward.
Sure. I also, real quick, I love how you're like, oh, Tom, it's all downhill from here. And then you share this most personal and like poignant story. And you're just like, oh yeah, that's my number 4. Like, bro.
I'm just bringing it out before, we have a misfire in my mental motor, and it all really goes to shits after this, and I start bringing up like the invention of the telephone. But
yeah, number 3 is bread. I like bread is good.
Wonder Bread. It's amazing.
No, but yeah, like Tom said, that should have been number 1. I mean, I would think that would.
Now we're judging Mike on his order. He's just like, well, now.
Hey, you got to listen to the show. I judge Mike on a lot of things. But
this is also under the addition that I may have to skedaddle, so I want to make sure that I didn't like keep pushing it off, and then, oh shit, I never brought up Japanese World War II internment.
And to your point, Mike, we just don't learn from those things, because World War I, they had the internment of certain Germans too. And then for them to do that and then jump into World War II, and guess what they do? They're going to intern the Japanese. So, and in a
Red
way,
Scare after that, like, it's, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. And even now with, like you said, the war on terrorism, what were they doing with a lot of the Muslims and stuff like that? They were scared of them. They started sending a lot of them to Guantanamo. They had those issues with it. So, yeah, I mean,
it's fascinating too, because a couple things, and these are the kind of things that you really push home. Like, that wasn't that long ago. Like, no. we're not taught. Like, people are still alive, right? Who like went through that, and I think that it's such a shame that it is really dependent on what we were just talking about on like the teacher you have, like where you're being taught about that, etc. A thing I always used to love to do with students, I was like, how do you think like the American Revolution is taught like in London? Like, how do you think like the differences there? Because it's like, ah, we did it, like America.
Bloody Yanks,
like,
ungrateful bastards.
Yeah,
Two sentences. Two
like,
sentences.
We talk
I
about.
was just watching a TikToker the other day from Britain that's a history teacher, and he said in the whole book there's 2 sentences
Yep.
to the American Revolution.
Bloody Yanks.
It's the freaking tea, man. But it's generational trauma, but it's also like how that impacts family dynamics, right? Because some family members be like, no, like we're renouncing this, like absolutely not. And then some are like, okay, like nope, we're gonna keep it going. And like how that like that's the stuff that makes history real, in my opinion, right? Because it's like, oh no, like this is, for example, one that I always talk about is World War II is often known as like the last good war, right? Which is oh boy, like dive into World War II and be like, for who? Who we looking at for here, right? But it's that idea that like there's the glorification afterwards. It's like, oh, okay, the winning side is in the right the entire time. And like, let's just be very clear. Nazism, very bad. Like, let's just get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Which we wouldn't have to say in 2024. But it's this idea that as time goes on, it's like, oh, we get further and further past it. And it's like, okay, yeah, it wasn't that bad, right? Like, oh, it was, but no, like there's significant events that have created so many issues. And the one that I've talked about all the time is World War II vets coming home from this last good war. And if you were a Black American soldier, right, like you didn't get access to the same home buying options. There was redlining. You didn't have all the help from the government that a lot of World War II vets got. That started a lot of like these suburban households, like suburbia as a whole. And like that stuff is felt still today from policies that were made back then.
Yeah,
you know,
and that's why a lot of them stayed in Europe. They stayed in Great Britain.
Sure.
They stayed in France. Not just during World War II, but in World War I, they would just stay over there because they were getting treated better.
Folks had more
over
rights
in those countries. Yeah,
yeah, it's nuts. So no, I appreciate you sharing that, man, because like that's what makes it real, right? And you're just like, no, I can see it within my family. Like you have this historical event happen, and what's the fallout from that?
Yeah. Well, Tom, you get to try to follow that one up.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Mike.
You're welcome.
Damn. All right. So like, I'm just gonna keep it historical. I'm gonna combine 2 things because it kind of aids and is around the same time. The invention of the printing press, which also kind of like falls in with the Protestant Reformation. So you have like, of course, like the Middle Ages, which is gonna be dominated by the Catholic Church in Western Europe. And as you see, like this Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther, of course, 95 Theses, all that great stuff, but more of literacy and how instead of going to the church for education or to get religion, you now can read it yourself. And because of that, all of these splits occur. Splits that are going to lead to like colonization from Western Europeans like of this country. So I think it's a massive fallout because you start to see, even though it's not massive, this increase in literacy, which is eventually going to lead to things that we talked about at the late 1800s. It's going to take hundreds of years, but you're eventually going to have a more educated society because of just having the accessibility of books. Because before, you're doing it by hand, right? And it's just like, all right, you're a scribe, have a nice day. And just even to get those folks, like you had to be literate, it had to be taught. It was a pretty significant job. And so now to have the printing press and just have that available, it's going to lead to not only changes within religion, but massive changes within society too. So nowhere near as good as Mike's.
Could you imagine having that job before the printing press?
No.
You have to sit there and write out each book. And then if you made a mistake, you had to rip that whole
freaking like, come on, man.
Lashings.
Dude, like, but imagine, like, even before that, because, like, scribes go back thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're a man on a tablet, and you're just like, oh, son of a bitch, I put the wrong one. Like, well, can't go there anymore.
You see, Denzel wasn't blind in the Book of Eli. He was just like, I'm not writing this fucker down. I'm going to learn to read Braille.
Like, I'm not getting carpal tunnel with this. It's not happening.
That makes you think about them transcribing, you know, religious documents.
Yeah.
How many of them got changed just because somebody screwed something up and he didn't want to change
or couldn't read the calligrapher before them?
Yeah, what did Mark do over here? I can't. You know what? It's fine. I'm sure this won't be a problem. Starts
Or if the wind picks up and blows the pages in a different order. Oh, shit.
That's it.
Wait a minute. There's supposed to be 8 commandments? Well, shit, I already
You just imagine the Pope reading the Bible one day that got blown out of order. And he's like, that sounded Old Testament. What's that doing in the middle of the New Testament? Oh, shit.
It's fine.
It's good. So my next one, I'm just gonna make it easy. I've already mentioned it. I love the Old West, so 1870s to the 1880s. You know, I always grew up with the stories of Jesse James and that, because where I'm at in Iowa, I'm in like 20 minutes from the Missouri border. So, you know, that was the James's area. And matter of fact, about an hour away from me is it's a old town, not very many people in it, but they still have a bank there that has a big old sign that Jesse James robbed this bank in 1870 something or 1860 something. So I grew up with it. Even, you know, there's stories from, like I said, doing genealogy that supposedly one of my family members was friends with, you know, you get that kind of stuff in there.
Cool.
So when you're a kid, you hear those stories, you just sit there and, okay, so there's a relation in there somewhere. So I'm just going to sit here and read. So, but, you know, I grew up on and then of course the Westerns, you'd watch the Westerns on TV and you'd see a name like, you know, Wyatt Earp or Bat Masterson. So, I want to go read about that. And, you know, that was my favorite time period.
Oh, yeah. Also, can you imagine being a bank teller from the 1800s and seeing that now and just be like, you guys put up a sign? He robbed us. Like, I was trying to work.
Well, I imagine that sign came up like a year after it happened, because
it's not going to be that long.
Can you imagine if one of us got time traveled into the Old West and you're like a bank teller and you're like, oh shit.
You're like, no.
You're like tapping underneath the teller bench, and they're like, what are you doing? And you're like, fuck, the button's not there.
There's nothing here. Phenomenal.
Somebody could just sneeze and I would just open the bank vault. Okay, yep,
here you go. Yours. Not a problem.
Stop, drop, roll.
What denomination do you want those bills in?
I'll do whatever you want. Please do not shoot me. I don't want to be amputated to live.
Dude, the West is so crazy too. Like if you like dive in to just like the individual stories and just how like people, there was no communication, or if there was, like significantly limited, where like then you have like people from the government are like, all right, I guess like we got to go out here and like make sure like they're not just all killing each other.
It makes you realize that Mike Shore pretty much ripped off the Wild West to write the historical backstories for Pawnee, Indiana in Parks and Recreation.
Yes.
Like quite literally.
It is perfect reference.
So I'm going to go to something a little more civilized, and it is something that was signed into law. Oh, Jesus. I'm not even going to do the math of that right now.
Wikipedia.
2 weeks ago today in 1956, Dwight Eisenhower signed in the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. Ooh. And someone who's never served in the military but has traveled cross-country by vehicle, I do appreciate the ramifications of it.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Dwight. We like Ike. But, you know, it is crazy to think that before 1956, it was like, you know, we'll get there by train. There's that airplane, and yes, we used it to drop a bomb on the Japanese 10 years ago, but maybe one day we'll be able to fly. You know, it will be a truly commercial way to travel. But it wasn't until Ike was staring at a map and it's like, well, shit. If something happens in California, how do we get our troops from? Oh, you mean they have to hop on a train and then they have to get off the train and unload everything off the train, and then there's a dirt road that goes through the Rockies, and oh wait, they might lose some. You mean that half of our military vehicles can't even trek the Rockies? Fuck it. You know what, guys? No, screw it. We're building highways across the interstates across this country. I say highways because, once again, where you grow up is where you are. Everyone goes, where is the? There's not an I dash anything in it because, brother, if you drive into another state, I can't tell. You need to tell me what the hell you did and what speed you were driving at because you skipped across the Pacific Ocean to get to the next state.
It's not gonna be too many highways.
and going on a sidetrack of this, when I was a senior in high school and I had been accepted to the University of Michigan, my mom pulls me aside one day and she goes, what you need to learn is you need to learn how to read street signs by highway names. But I'm like, Mom, there's only like 3 of them. H1, H2, H3. And she goes, yes. But if you ask she goes, not every interstate is named on the mainland. And someone is going to look crazy at you if and so we do have like what would be the quote unquote interstates that, on Oahu, they link up Kaneohe Marine Corps to Hickam Air Force Base at, the international airport. Diamond Head is interconnected. Eva Beach and all of those that, if you've taken a World War II history class, all the places the Japanese bombed on Pearl Harbor. but you have the smaller, like what would be like your guys' smaller, through the boony town highways and stuff. We have those, but they all have names. We don't call them the, Highway 99, Highway 61 or whatever. And so she goes, they might have names for part of them, but if you're trying to figure out where the I-15 turns into the I-34, you're going to be sorely mistaken, and no one's going to tell you turn at the big rock like we do out here. So
it's on the left.
Yeah, tell people every time before they come out here, be prepared to throw all of your no one is going to know what the hell you're talking about if you ask them, where does the H201 become the H1 again if I am coming eastbound? If you tell them, look up at the hill and look for Tripler, that's where you're going to notice that there's an interchange. Oh, okay. So but coming back to like I said, I know that the military does their maneuvers. My father-in-law was a he was a Navy lifer. He did all the spin ups, the maneuverings, the war, the makeup wars where it's like, hey, the East Coast is getting bombed. We're gonna spin up, get ready to go and support if we have to. Who is going, who is staying behind and stuff. And that 1956 Highway Act, that is what really linked the country. The train, the steam power linked the two coasts initially, but to be able to drive across the country. And like I said, I'm someone who has benefited from it in more of a recreational to see as many states as I can with. But in all honesty, it's like, if you don't have that, if you don't have a visionary, and who's not to say that someone wouldn't have figured it out in the subsequent decades following, but for Ike to see it in a time where it's like, not everyone necessarily has a card, not everyone has dreams of really, going from New York to California or anything like that. And kind of like you said, Tom, you can send a telegraph in that time, but it's like, when's it gonna get there and all? And
when it gets there,
almost 70 years later, to be able to say like, hey, I can drive, it's gonna take a week, but I can drive from Maine to basically to the nearest parts of Southern California. I can go across the country and not the most direct route, but I can get there. That is what, for non-military members, that's what the end result of the 1956 Act is.
I like it.
I just love the fact that Mike's mom had to give him like a tourist guide's book just to send him to Michigan.
And hey, just remember, this is still in the era where I know I'm younger than the two of you, but this is still an era where we had phones where it was like, do not click that globe. If you click that globe, you're like, no. You're like pulling the battery out of your phone because your parents are about to disconnect you from their family phone plan because you open the magic internet and it's going to cost them $40 a second.
Yeah.
So it's like,
it was MapQuest. That was printing out pages on MapQuest to be like, how are
do
we going?
college. Yeah, exactly. To do college tours. My dad's like, did you print the MapQuest?
Yep.
Oh,
Dude, like
fuck.
it's so crazy that
He's like, you do know we're going to Purdue today, not Notre Dame. Oh shit.
like,
Where's the nearest gas station? There it is. See my dad going in.
It's so
I need
wild.
a map. Yeah.
Because like I talked about this was in that US history class. Like we talked about like trains and like the creation of like schedules and like how that starts to create like organization of like, oh, like I know when I'm gonna be in this place, because like you said before, it was all right, well, like I'm just gonna go, and when I get there, I'm gonna get there. But now like there's a somewhat precise time of like the train's gonna arrive this time, it's gonna depart at this time. You talk about like creation of electricity, because I was like, all right, it's nighttime, going to bed. Like, that's it. Oh, it's after 6 o'clock. Gotta go to bed now. Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's like a really niche one, but like to talk about like that connectivity stuff, absolutely.
Okay, and then I'm gonna have to hop off, so I'm just gonna give you my last two. And first off, I want to say, Tom, thank you again. Like I said, the sun is just coming up now.
We've seen the progression. Like, it's light outside now.
I wasn't going to say anything, but yeah, I saw it.
Lighting looks so much better.
Oh no, but so like I said, I'm gonna say it now. Tom, thank you so much. As Joe said, it's been an endeavor to try and get certain pillars of the Packers blogosphere on, and I just want to say, as a huge fan of all the content you put out, but your 30 for 30 tour, all of just the work that you put into that, the charity work that it was for. I want to say thank you for all of your efforts and being there's good fans, there's great fans, there's bad fans in every fan base, but I just want to say thank you for being a great face for Packers fandom, to be like, like we hate that team, but that Tom Grossi guy, that guy's pretty okay. So but don't let him
get a good amount of that.
Mike, you don't have to suck up anymore. We've already got him on the show, so
Mike's like, I'm leaving.
And also, I want to try and leave the door open to a return visit. So, so my last two are going to be, and we're going to just stick, like Tom said, how you view the world is how, like, where you come up from. So my last two are going to be world, just being air travel, being able to travel, and the commercialization. And I know, like, I'm someone who, for the longest time, it says like the government needs to stop bailing out billion-dollar travel companies, because in the end, it doesn't get to the people who really make the magic happen. It's going only to fat cats who are just putting it in their back pocket and saying like, well, I'm not bankrupt. I'm not filing for Chapter 13 this year, but just as someone who lives on an island and at some point is going to see receding shorelines cause to have to, well, hopefully not in my lifetime, and my house is up on a hill relative to the rest of Waikiki and stuff, but like Waikiki is literally down there. but air travel, like being able to like technology is at the forefront of advancement in travel, and it's like if you told someone who flew like an F4 in World War II, hey, one day there's going to be a jet that not just will take you from the west coast of the US to Europe, but it's going to fly over the polar ice cap, when you're talking to a dude who's flying a prop plane, where it's like, if I do not fly this in the perfect conditions, I'm going to lose fuel efficiency, my rotor might cut out, I might have bird strike, whatever. Like, and you tell him that you're going to take 300 something people and you're going to fly over the polar ice cap and you're going to get there in less than a day. It's like, he's going to look at you like, the fuck you say, bro?
Yeah.
So that's one of them. And then the other one is worldwide fiber optics, and just another way to connect the world. And I am a nature person, and I do hate when you see the videos of like, this is a whale that got tangled in the fiber optic cable and stuff like that. But
it's accurate.
Just knowing how, like we said, in the US, which is a contiguous continent, that Hawaii and Alaska weren't states, they weren't even territories at that point. So those contiguous states, you have you have the 13 original colonies. The Louisiana Purchase doubles the size of the country. It's like, we're gonna send this dude on a horse. He's in good health for the 1800s, but he might keel over. Or it's the Arnold line from True Lies, the never dying Arnold line from True Lies. And hurry, my horse is getting tired. But it's like, like we think of like, okay, I've got, you send something within your state and it's like, it should get there in a day or two. And if you send it, a couple states over, you're like, okay, like it'll be a week, or, I might do like next day guarantee or whatever. It's like, you're sending this dude on a horse and it's like, and you're just like, I can just imagine you're standing there in 1789 and you're watching this guy on a horse go away, and it's like, is that guy too big for that horse? Does that horse look like it has a limp as it's walking, as it's trotting away from us? Is that sack gonna hold on to the parcel that I've given him? Is he gonna have to stop for food? I'm in New York and he's going to that Oklahoma territory down there. It's probably not even called Oklahoma at this point. But like, or even as you're just sitting there, can you imagine as the White House is getting burnt down by the British in the War of 1812. And it's like the people in the rest of the country, you've got military conglomerates in different states. And like a month later, some dude strolls up on horseback. Oh yeah, the White House burned down, the British are back. And it's like,
had a delivery for the White House, but got there just a bit too late.
And as you're waiting, you're waiting for the return, it's like, when is the Virginia regiment getting here? When is the Georgia regiment getting here? It's like, can you imagine if you like took a set of long range, like forget even like but like you just took the most basic telephone and it was just magically able to connect, and it's like, just George, trust me, or Thomas, trust me, just push this button and you're gonna talk to Billy Van Zane down over in that new Louisiana territory, and he's gonna tell you it's luscious farmland and shit like that. He'll be like,
dude, it's like what we're doing right now. I mean, like literally, like how we're like talking to each other, right? So that's why it's your number one. You're just like, because we were able to do this podcast.
And in there, I wish you two that are only an hour apart a great afternoon and rest of your day. Tom, thank you. Joe, carry it out. Thank you very much. Take care, you guys.
Appreciate you, dude. That's hysterical. But he's like, I'm done. I'm done. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, we'll get through. We'll get through. We'll rock out these last two.
Yeah, we'll kind of speed run these because I know you've got your stuff that you got to get done too. So
yeah, I got to skedaddle in a hot minute, but we'll get through two. It's a cheating one, but it is so big. It's industrial rev, like just for like that leads to all these things that we were talking about, and there's some definite downsides to it. But in terms of, I mean, dude, like even just talking about the fact that you have the invention of planes and the internet, and they're not that far apart.
Nope.
Right, like, and that's just like progress. Well, it's wild.
Even the telephone and internet, that's not even that far apart.
Dude, like, I remember my first my first track phone that I had to go to Staples and buy, like, the card and be like, I gotta get my prepaid minutes so I can text and call. And now it's like, oh, I have a computer in my pocket.
Well, and I still remember at home where you could only walk into a room as far as your cord would allow you.
Yep.
So, the push pad, it wasn't even so
the family computer.
And the dial-up sound. Kids today don't even know the dial-up sound.
No, they don't. Kids don't know these days about the you couldn't use the phone. You picked up the phone when someone was on the internet and it blared in your ear. Yep.
Or somebody tried calling through and for an hour and then they finally get through. What the hell were you doing for so long?
Yep. I was on AIM. Come on, guys.
So my number two is the 1920s Harry Houdini debunking spiritualists.
Ooh, I like that.
I love Harry Houdini. If you give me a show that, and I'm kind of just getting in, just kind of sitting there, and they say Harry Houdini, I'm immediately into it because I love Harry Houdini. But I really love his fight with spiritualists. because this was the original debunker. He made it, and it all came down to the simple fact that he was grieving over losing his mom, and some medium said, well, we can contact her, and it was a complete shit show, and he was like, no, this isn't happening anymore. And he made it his mission, and I give him props, because he really kicked down that door and said, you're throwing away your money for nothing, because all they're doing is knocking on the table, or they're sitting, they've got an accomplice next door or whatever. And I love that guy. I would, if I had a time period that I could go back to watch, it would be when Harry Houdini was doing that stuff, just because it was amazing.
We talk about these like movements, especially like when I was teaching AP and stuff, kind of like what you're saying. And it goes back to the number 5 of like those late 1800s. There's a foundational shift, right, in which science starts to become the foundation of society rather than religion and faith. And that is a huge, and that's not to say, of course, religion doesn't exist, because obviously it does. But like for the longest time, like religion was the backbone and foundation of like, oh, how do we explain a lot of these things? Because even during the Enlightenment, scientific revolution, like all this stuff, those are outliers, right? Like there's scientists who are doing stuff, but they're kind of closed off groups. As communication improves, they're going to start reaching out a little bit more. But it really takes until like the late 1800s for it to become like the foundational of like, oh, something needs to get explained. We're turning to science for that rather than the unknown or like something bigger like religion.
Yeah, for sure. And I always tell people the same thing that Houdini told his wife, that and I do believe in paranormal. I've had some weird shit happen to me.
Oh yeah.
That there's no explanation for it. But I always tell people, hey, if I'm actually going to come through to you, this is what I'm going to tell you.
Sure.
It's, I'm not going to give you any bullshit. And it's not going to be, oh, well, I see a number 3 and no, it's going to be a legit, this is what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
All right. So number 1, Tom.
All right. You ready for the lamest answer ever? But I will fight tooth and nail, because I think it's literally the most important thing in human history. It's a Neolithic revolution. It's a creation of farming. That's it. Without farming, we literally don't have anything. Yeah. Because farming, like now all of a sudden you don't have to go out for your food, or at least significantly less. People could start settling down in one area, which was not happening before. And now all of a sudden you have food supply, so now you can maintain a greater population, and it literally starts like us. So it's a cheap one. It's definitely a cheap pop. So when I taught freshmen, like that's one of the first things we talk about, right? Like we talk about Paleolithic age, but like I impress upon them like, hey, farming, because it's tough to make, 9th graders care about farming that happened thousands and thousands of years ago, right? It's a little bit difficult. So instead, like I tell them, I was like, hey, like, listen, literally none of this happens. Like nothing. Like we're not having this conversation. No one's sitting in schools, and people are like, oh, so it's farmers' fault? I was like, maybe. But again, like none of it happens until we're able to grow food in the ground and stay in one place.
And for someone who continuously bitches about farmers because I have to deal with them on a constant basis, I can see where you're coming from on that. So yeah, I mean,
the farmers in the chat right now are like, yes, let's go.
And you want to talk about cheap pop? My last one is the ultimate cheap pop.
Oh, is it? I swear to God, if you go like 1919, if we go creation of Green Bay Packers.
And that's what it is.
Let's go.
That's the ultimate, because that's the ultimate cheap pop. That's the main reason why me and you are conversating right now.
It's true.
It's the main reason all of us create content for this stuff. Without that, who knows? You'd still probably be teaching, 9th and 10th graders, and well, I still work, but I mean,
You're like, I would have slept in on this Saturday. Wait a minute.
But, really, and it goes beyond just being Packer fans, because without that creation, who knows what the NFL would be? Would we have an NFL? Because without the Packers being one of the foundational teams, it could be a lot different. And without Curly Lambeau and stuff like that, who knows what the NFL would be? So, Yeah, I'm definitely going for the cheap pop. This one's the major one, but it should be in the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, dude, it's crazy, and I tell this to people, even if you're not a Packers fan, but it took me over 20 years to make it to Green Bay because, like, living in New York, it is expensive to go to Green Bay. I couldn't get a direct flight. So I flew to Milwaukee, rented a car. This happened in my late 20s to go to a Chiefs preseason game at Lambeau Field. It's when a Kmart was across the street and it was not Titletown. And I legitimately think it is one of the greatest stories, like, in sports by far. And of course, like, there's going to be bias because I'm a Packers fan, but when you go to Green Bay and everything is Packers, and what I mean by that is, like, you're talking to people whose, you know, grandparents were, like, hit in the back by a ball from Curly Lambeau, right? Like, and it's just like, oh yeah, like I was watching the first game, absolutely, like at the park, 100%, and to see just like how embedded the history of the team is, and how, like, I say this all the time, like, you don't have Green Bay without the Packers, and you don't have the Packers without Green Bay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just like how it's such a special place, and it's such a cool place, and it's so different from every other team in the league. Yeah, it's a special thing, my friend. It's special.
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said, I had to go for it. It should be in everybody's top 10. I always tell people, even if you're not a Packers fan, you need to at least make the trip to Lambeau one time because it is a special thing. So, well, I think we made it to the list. It was great to have you on, Tom. Like I said, I really appreciate it. It was one of those things that, all right, now I checked this one off the list. Now we got to shoot higher for it.
That's it.
But you know, obviously people know where to find you, but if you just want to go ahead and shout your stuff out real quick.
It is Tom Grossi. It's Monday. It's Tom Grossi. You could find me. I appreciate you having me on, Joe. This was great. This was a lot of fun.
Hopefully we can get you on again, and we can work it out and unfortunately our in-season schedules are even worse than what our off-season schedules are. So but like I said, it was great having you on. For us, you can find us on Twitter, Insta. Hell, I don't even know what our socials are anymore, but it's at Ohana_Packers. You can follow me at Iowa_Joe86, Mike at Quano Mike. Get the podcast wherever you get your podcast, YouTube. We've got the website, ohanapackers.org, where you can get all kinds of our articles. We've got some great writers over there. You can find our podcast. You can find Brian's podcast, Cheese Talk. Merch. Go buy our merch. We've got shirts. We've got hats. We even got coffee. Go get our coffee.
There you go.
You know, we need the money. You know, it's not cheap doing a podcast.
It's true.
Well, it is kind of cheap, but I mean, you know, it still helps having those funds come in. But you know, and you know, drop us a line. Say, hey, you know, that was a shitty show. If it was a shitty show, you know, I don't care. Just drop us some kind of line.
That's it. Feedback.
Feedback's feedback. If you want to see anybody certain on the show, you know, give us a shout out. Let us know who you want to see on. And as Mike would say, we're going to give you a go pack go and aloha.